Hello everybody. What I have in front of me are all four eSwap controllers. We have the PS4 eSwap, the eSwap X Pro, the eSwap S, and the latest edition eSwap X2 Pro. There's also an XR version, but that controller is the same as this one. It just got racing colors on it. What we're going to do here is we're going to compare all four of these controllers and see what are the differences and similarities are. Let's begin with this one. This is for the PS4. As you can see here, it's got the PlayStation buttons, and all of these have mice switches. In terms of the feel, honestly, they all feel exactly the same to me. They're nice and clicky. The travel is pretty short. You can press them at the same time, no problem at all. Aside from the color schemes, they're pretty much the same buttons. And what's special about the eSwap controllers is you can remove these modules and then switch them around. I wish these face buttons is also a module as well. That way you can switch them to different places. For example, if you're left-handed and you want the face buttons to be over here, that would be amazing. These guys are wired controllers. On the PlayStation version, it's micro USB. You see this end is pretty big, because it's got to go into this little hole right here. It just fits right in there. And on the X, it's the same thing, micro USB. But when it gets to the S, it's USB-C. You see there's no more hole. Now on the X2, oh, check this out, the hole returns. The hole on the X2 is not as deep as the X1. It's kind of fun to see the evolution of it, right? The eSwap on the PlayStation 4 is the only one with a trackpad, but I never really use it honestly because I only play fighting games. The PS4 version is the only one that comes with this grippy detachable grip. It's made with a rubbery material. The X and the X2, they both are also detachable, but it's smooth. It doesn't feel as premium. And on the S, it's also smooth, but it's got this texture around it and it's non-detachable. When it comes to the trigger and the shoulder buttons, the PS4 version, the trigger is kind of small. Well, maybe small is the wrong word, but it's shorter but wider. You see how on the X it's longer and it's more curved on the X. The X and the X2 is essentially identical. It's also the same on the S. Speaking of triggers, the PS4 version is the only one that does not have trigger locks. So check this out. There's a little space here. They filled it with this rubber feet. But on the X Pro, look at this. They implemented a trigger lock. Same thing on the S Pro and on the X2 Pro. Having the space here on the back leads me to believe that they had plans to have trigger locks to begin with for this controller. But for whatever reason, they didn't include it and they left it out. One of the things I didn't like about the X2 are the joysticks. They're really tall. So doing 360 takes a little bit longer than on the S, which has really short joysticks. Yeah, these are so much better. And surprisingly, on the PS4 version, the joysticks are also really short. Hopefully you can see the difference here. The PS4, the X Pro, and the X Pro 2, they all have 4 back buttons. But for some reason, on the S, there's only 2. Look at this. The S is definitely lighter. The X2 is a lot heavier for sure. But I wouldn't call this guy a light controller. It's only lighter when you compare it to the other eSwap controllers. In terms of weight, this guy's the lightest, the S, then the PS4 version, then the X Pro, and this guy's the heaviest, the X2. It's super heavy. On the PlayStation eSwap, if you look at the controls, there's only 2 buttons. This is the profile button and the mic button. And now if you look at the X, you see now there are 6 buttons compared to only 2. You got volume up and down, mic button, 2 profile buttons, and a map button. And it's the same thing for the X and the X2. They both have 6 buttons. And on the S, there's nothing. I feel that the PlayStation version of the eSwap is not a finished product. Having space on the trigger lock on the shell of the controller, but no switch. And then only having 2 buttons when you get all this space tells me that this product is not complete. And if you look at the X and the X2, it's fully featured. And of course with the S, this is a cheaper stripped down version of the eSwap controller. Not only are the face buttons non-removable, but also the D-pad is also non-removable. And this is the only controller here where the D-pad is not removable. The D-pad on the S is my least favorite. This thing is really slow. I have a really hard time doing double taps on this. But you know what this is good for? This is actually pretty good for 2D fighters and motion inputs. Because the surface here, as you can see, is very smooth. You can slide your thumb around pretty easily. And the D-pad is also on the smaller side, so it's easier for you to do diagonals. Because the gaps here are not huge. Compare that to the PlayStation version. The buttons here are really skinny and long, so the gaps are really big. You really need to have big thumbs to get 2 of these buttons at once. Also, the travel on here is not a lot, really shallow. And the X has the exact same D-pad. And then when you go to the X2, you see the D-pad on here is a lot more similar to on the S. Now the difference between this one and this one is the D-pad on here is a lot more responsive. I have no trouble doing double taps on here. And it's also removable as well. Out of all of these controllers, the X2 has the best D-pad. But this D-pad is not perfect though. This thing is pretty heavy. You have to use a lot of strength and force to press these guys. Whereas with this D-pad, it's a little bit lighter to the touch. It's a little easier to press. Same thing here. Even the D-pad on the S is easier to press. I'm thinking with the X2, I think they use a different type of switch here. As you can see here, the edges are kind of rounded, so it's really hard to feel your way around. They all feel kind of the same. This feels more like a disc than a cross-shaped D-pad. Motion inputs are excellent on here because of this, but diagonal is going to take you some time to get used to, because you can't really feel the edges at all. Whereas on here, you can definitely feel the edges, right? So for example, if I want to do down back, so I place my thumb on this edge and press it together. Alright, here we go. That's our down back diagonal. But on here, can't really feel the edges at all. But the good news is you do get used to it over time. Alright, so which one is the best controller out of this whole bunch? Well, the answer is none of them is perfect. However, the X2 is the most feature rich of them all. Since I don't like these tall joysticks, I'm going to take them out. And I do like the joysticks on the S. I'm going to take this guy out, put it over here. And I really don't play anything else aside from fighting games. I'm going to take the D-pad from the X out and put it right here. There you are. This is the best eSwap controller that you can have. Now you have 2 D-pads that allows you to do multiple directions at once. And now you have a shorter joystick. You can do 360 pretty easily on here. The ability to switch these out are amazing. The possibilities are literally endless. How about this guy? 3 joysticks? Maybe this is good for like, I don't know, racing games, flight simulators. What about this guy? 3 D-pads. This is definitely good for fighting games and also puzzle games. And we also have the racing wheel here. Check that out. How cool is that? Alrighty, hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe for more, and take care now.